We'll hear from callers. Patricia's up first in Dade City, Florida, Democratic caller. Hi, Patricia.
Hi, how are you this morning? And thank you for taking my call.
Morning.
I think that,
Hey, Patricia, you got to turn that TV down, okay? Just listen to me through your phone.
okay,
There we go.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I think that from the inception of the first incident that's reported, that something really needs to be done at that juncture, because most of the time the women who are affected by this, and I know this firsthand because I grew up in this kind of a household, there was nobody there to help us. And the thing is that the police were called and the person went to jail and then the person was released, and it happens all over again. Right. Until the person that's being abused, something is given to them where they're not made to feel guilty, nothing is going to change. It is a self-esteem and a self-respect issue for the individual. Nothing short or nothing wrong about that. So, if that person lacks those two qualities about themselves, there's an issue.
And Patricia, can I ask, what would give the abused self-esteem? I mean, is it
that has to come from within, ma'am, and it has to come from a family structure. Not everybody has that in place, unfortunately. The thing is that we are who we are no matter what we do in this life. You either feel good about yourself or you don't. But having been a victim of this kind of a household as a child, I had to face my confronter, which turned out to be my father. And he used to beat my mother constantly. And I faced him until one of the relatives, his brother, as a matter of fact, challenged him whether or not I was going to have him arrested. And when it was my turn, I challenged my own father. After that, things changed. But not on behalf of my mother, it was on behalf of me and my uncle. So it has to start from the very beginning. There is just too much of it.
Okay.
I see it every day.
Okay, Patricia. Congresswoman.
You know, Patricia, I was not at all surprised by the way Jada Rice reacted. From the very beginning, she saw him as the victim. She took responsibility for it happening. I'm sorry about my role in making this happen. And then her latest
posting on Instagram.
Right, on Instagram, about how everyone else is victimizing her husband. From one thing, according to all news reports, she's a stay-home mom, and she's economically dependent upon him. And this is the story of a victim. And so I don't think that this is something, Patricia, that is necessarily innate. I do think that the role of the Violence Against Women Act and the advocacy services that are provided really can help her work through those esteem issues to get to a place where she can stand up for herself. You know, she's done everything. She has a real stake in keeping her family together. But keeping her, it won't work to just allow him to take victim stance. She is the victim, and until he acknowledges that he did wrong and that she is in fact the victim, and he gets the right sort of counseling and the right, righting himself, I'm afraid that their family may not last.
Is there something more the Congress, the government can do? Is there more needed in the Violence Against Women's Act?
Well, we always need more resources. There are always there's tremendously more need than there are resources, and you know, the reauthorizations occur. The best practices of law enforcement and advocates are brought to bear on what the next reauthorization ought to include. We definitely need to be able to help women deal with their economic imprisonments, so to speak. I mean, there ought to be transitional housing, lower cost housing, maybe retraining for women, because so many women stay in relationships because of the economic impact. Now, Jana Price obviously has access to more income than do other women, but I do think at whatever point, if this relationship is not going to work, law enforcement ought to be there to make sure she has the kind of economic freedom so that she doesn't have to stay in this relationship. I would venture to guess, I think it's risky to say this, Patricia, but I would bet that this isn't the first time he hit her.
Carol Olds on Twitter says, I understand the extremely poor, abused spouse who feels as if she has no way out, but one who is married to a rich man could leave. And then Laura says, is it really the NFL's responsibility to deal with crime? Kelly in Rome, Georgia, Republican caller. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, thank you so much for taking my call. Yes, I agree a lot with what your guest is saying. One thing that has upset me is Miss Rice is definitely a victim, and I do not want to re-victimize her again. My one big problem is that most women do tend to stay with the abuser based on financial reasons. My problem with what's going on in the media and everything is that we continue to look at her as this poor, pathetic person, and she lied. She to about what happened in there. She knew the video, and she does have resources. She could be a strong woman right now to come out and stand up. She married him. She could have said, no, I'm not going to marry you right now till you go through intense counseling. She could have had a big platform. She has his child. She had access to $1 million player that would have supported her and her child.
Okay. All right, Kelly. Paul in Pennsylvania, Democratic caller. Paul, your thoughts.
Good morning, Miss Greta.
Morning.
Good morning, Miss Gwen.
Hi.
Hi. First of all, Miss Gwen, I would like to commend you for your persistence on this issue, because it really needs to be addressed. It's a major problem in this country that people tend to overlook, so to speak. I have a childhood friend who was in a relationship for many years. She had a circle of friends and family that warned her about this relationship she was in, and well, she ended up being a victim of murder-suicide. And it was an 8-hour standoff with the state police, and it was just an ugly scene, and it's something that people need to wake up to. And I commend you for your actions on this. So.
Okay, Paul. Congresswoman?
Unfortunately, this happens too often, and I have personally known several people, women who have lost their lives. And like I say, the perpetrator doesn't wake up one day and just kill you. There are signs that friends and relatives see all the time. And so I think it's extremely important for people who are around these women to warn them. It doesn't go from zero to murder in one day. With regard to Jana's behavior, I do think that she doesn't necessarily see that she has all those resources available to her. I mean, she was not married to this man until the day after he was indicted. And so it takes a lot of legal finagling to be able to have access to to her now husband's money. And so I do think that that she, just like hundreds of thousands of other women, stay in relationships because of a certain economic dependency. But it's incumbent upon friends and relatives and the advocate community to try to support women so that they can see their way through. And I would hope the best for Jana and Ray Rice's relationship. Perhaps there are some sort of interventions that can occur. Maybe this is a huge wake-up call to Mr. Rice, because it is possible that he could deal with his anger in a professional way, but it has to be more than just Jana signing off on an intervention plan so that he can get his job back. It has got to be something that he will take seriously.
Time Magazine's Charlotte Alter has this piece on the website. Instead of asking women why they stay, we should ask men why they hit. The hashtag why I stayed is well-intentioned, but it's a good answer to a bad question. And she writes that it's a good impulse, but a bad question. Why didn't you leave is to domestic violence what why were you out so late is to rape. It puts the focus on the victim's choice to stay rather than the abuser's choice to hit her. Julia, Portland, Democratic caller. Hi, Julia.
Hi. I was just basically wanting to call in because I am a survivor of domestic violence, and when I seen the video, I was just like really taken back because it brought back, a lot of memories. And so, I don't know why I stayed for as long as I did, but I can honestly say that this young woman needs to get out of that relationship, and this man needs counseling, because it doesn't, I didn't care. When I seen the video, I didn't care how much money he had. I just felt for this young woman and her life.
Julia, can I ask you, what resources were available to you legally? Police? Advocates?
The police were always very kind. They would always remove him from the house. He would always break in the middle of the night, disturbing my children. He was my husband, being very just abusive, always accusing and blaming, and just not being absent pretty much and accusing. So it was just, always just a really violent type of behavior, and that's what I seen in that elevator for this young woman.
And Julia, do you know about the Violence Against Women Act?
I am aware of it. I just recently decided to get literally just leave the person, because it, where the person couldn't contact me or call me or anything, because, love hides a multitude of faults. And I don't care how much money, give the money up and just get safe for you and your children. Okay. That's basically what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to money or this man's career. It comes down to this man literally violated this woman.
Okay. Congresswoman.
It is really so true, but it's easier said than done. I was so appalled that after they were arrested, they both went home. I would have been terrified to have to go back and get in the same bed with this man who just rendered me unconscious, without any sort of, break for his rage to subside. Looking at the video and noting that there was no effort on his part to try to bring her to or to resuscitate her or revive her, just kind of drag her out of the elevator. I do think that that she is at risk now because he has lost his job, and I'm very, very concerned about her safety now, because to the extent that his career is on hold or perhaps ruined, I don't want her to endure the blame for that.
Still, an individual on Twitter says, when we glorify war, football games with Navy jets and SEAL skydivers at Notre Dame, what can we expect? Violence is what we do. And Mylan Burke says, what about all these other guys who abuse women still playing in the NFL?
Well, they didn't have a quote-unquote policy. And, part of what enables violence, domestic violence, to be perpetuated is the shame and the silence. Had Jana not been in that elevator, had she been rendered unconscious at home, no one would even know about it. And I think, abusers, rapists really rely on women not coming forward in order to be able to continue it. So this is a silent crime.
So based on that point, Edwin on Twitter wants to know, what's your evidence, Congresswoman, that the act, the Violence Against Women Act, has reduced violence? The polls show that 23% are reported and less go to court.
Well, my evidence is the numbers of women that are rescued from situations. They call hotlines. They get out of relationships. They get job training. And there are men who are renewed and restored. There are families that are saved. And to the extent that women have options and alternatives, they don't allow it. So, what might have been 5, 6, 7 years of accepting an abusive relationship, women get out of it right away.
Mountain Home, North Carolina. Tom, independent caller.
Yes, ma'am.
Morning, Tom.
Good morning. I served 10 years as a police officer, and I went through a number of domestic violence calls. In every case, it seemed that the woman is very low self-esteem, and the man controls her in every way. But the thing that there's a problem is that the following day, even though we separated them, the following day she refuses to sign a complaint form, and the legal system is in handcuffs. Now, the reason that Ray Rice married her yesterday, I can assure you, is that he now has a protection of spousal privilege, that nothing can be said, and she can't be compelled to say anything against him now. And another thing is, prior bad acts. Is this not the same Ray Rice who 8 or 10 years ago who was on trial for as an accomplice in a murder for hire?
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that, Tom. But to his point about husband-wife privilege, Congresswoman,
they had been together since 2008, and suddenly that passionate moment that so many women look forward to when the man asked him to marry them occurred the day after he was indicted. So, I'm just saying.
But legally, is that a situation that often comes up for women of domestic violence, is that they can't be compelled to testify against their husband?
That is a legal protection for the men. And what we've been saying all morning, Greta, is that Jana has behaved like the typical victim, and she has been protecting him, protecting his career, trying to prevent him from enduring the legal consequences of his behavior, and not looking at herself, her protection, even her medical health. And
is that a common occurrence with
yes,
women of
this
domestic
is very,
violence?
very common.
So it's not just about Jana
This is not
Rice.
an outlier. This is the pattern for women, and the police officer is correct. Maybe we do need some laws, and this is not necessarily a congressional act, but in state legislatures, we do need some laws where, under some circumstances, it's not necessary for women to sign off on a complaint in order for them to take legal action. I mean, when you're rendered unconscious, like I said before, if Ray Rice were lying out there on the field for unconscious for 2 minutes, trust me, the NFL would have put all their resources toward getting him medical treatment. So why is it that she can be dragged out of an elevator and then carted off to jail, and then the DA just wash their hands and say, well, you didn't complain, so go on home now?
Well, Gene on Twitter says, what do you think of the NFL's domestic violence policy that states if the woman recants the charge of domestic violence against a player, recants on that charge, a player, she will be punished? I'm not sure if that's actually the policy. But what about this idea of recanting? I mean, you were just sort of talking about that.
I think it's extremely important to know that victims of domestic violence are victims, and there are predictable behaviors with regard to not reporting. I'm thinking, I was outraged when Senator Gillibrand wrote her book and talked about how she was a victim of sexism, and everybody jumped on her. Prove it. Who was it? Who was it? And this is why women don't report. They don't report because people immediately blame them, immediately indict them, immediately question what their involvement was. When Jana was dragged out of that elevator, the hotel employee's response was, oh, she's drunk. They immediately assumed the worst of her. And I think that, I heard Kim Gandy say, just this morning, that it is important to have this discussion. This is the biggest discussion we've had about domestic violence, and I hope that it's going to be an educational opportunity for America to look at this case and to realize that this is just classic for the predicament that women find themselves in. They are economically dependent. They are drawn into a narrative of blaming themselves, trying to rescue the perpetrator not taking responsibility. And in this case, I think one of the reasons people have been so upset about the NFL and the Ravens is because they wrapped all these resources around him. Lawyers and statements. It was a minor altercation. And who was there for Jana? Not even a person to make sure that she was okay after having been rendered unconscious.
Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Ann is watching us there. Democratic caller. Hi, Ann.
Hi. Well, I'm glad to get in it, sort of. I'm an elderly lady, probably older than Miss Moore. However, there's another side of the domestic violence. When women deliberately have babies out of wedlock, and they pursue these men because they see a potential or a career, and then it's all this money. They do it for money, and then the court system is skewed toward the woman, where no matter what's happening to the man's health or whatever, then they demand a certain amount of money, and it's as though he has to take care of her, even though neither one wants to marry the other. And I understand from the tabloids that the fight started outside of the elevator, and they were boxing each other outside of the elevator. I understand they were both drunk. So the falling down in the elevator didn't have to be with the strike. It could be with the strike and the alcohol. And she spat in his face. It ran up in his face. You can see that on the video, as though to hit him. So, I mean, there's more than one side to this domestic violence.
Congresswoman?
Well, there's more than one side to every story. He should not have hit her. I have 2 sons. They had better not hit any woman, unless she's ready to take his life or something. He's a football player. And so I don't know what kind of boxing she was doing that threatened him. but there's no excuse to beat a woman. No excuse. All the bad behavior that you talked about, you know, she got pregnant on purpose, she, you know, tried to trap him into a marriage, he didn't want to marry her. All that may or may not be true. He should not have punched her lights out.
Bernice, Columbia, South Carolina, independent caller. Hi, Bernice.
Yes, yes. Columbia, South Carolina is the #1 state in the nation for domestic violence, and we're counted 10 for the most murders of women from their husbands, their fiancés, their boyfriends. We are subjected to so much violence, even after calling the police and the investigators. I begged them. I called the military hospitals. I called everyone. I have a career. I'm a registered nurse. But I also got really, really sick. But the investigator who knew about the case, who knew about the rape charges, didn't even submit it to the solicitor office. I had a restraining order. I did everything that I could. I called helplines. I called ID on a fort. No one would help me. You know what they're telling me? Don't talk. Be quiet.
Right.
Don't say anything.
Right.
Things are going to change. It's not going to change. I'm not from here. I'm here based on military. And I supported my husband from him being an E6 to a commander when I was a nurse. And I worked sick. I worked beat up when he came back from Iraq with TBI and post-traumatic stress. I stayed with them. I prayed. I was in fear of my life. I have 2 beautiful children. I have a son at West Point. I have a daughter in college with a scholarship. Beautiful children. I have a career. I am independent. I got out. But when I got out, I was again in another abusive relationship with the city, with the county, with the investigator who has been talking to me the whole time, who knew about it. But when I protected myself, when he said, I'm killing you tonight because nobody's going to take my house from me. And he would always say that. His house, no one's going to take my bars from me. No one helped me. So now I have a public defender because I have no money, but my disability, I had to switch apartments. My daughter is scared to death. My son is safe, thank God, up at West Point because they're wonderful up there.
And Bernice, can I ask you what help did you get from the military?
I got no help from the military. I called the VA Dorn Medical Center, and I tried to speak to the case manager. She would not talk to me. I even went up there. I said, don't you remember me? Talk to me as a woman. Okay. I said, I was a nurse. I'm a nurse, but I'm on disability now, but I'm a person. She wouldn't talk to me. They told me his appointment doesn't come until 4 months later.
Okay. Let's take this issue of the issue of domestic violence within the military.
I would tell her to call Representative Clyburn's office, you know, offline, and share her story with him. I mean, again, here we are, a situation where a powerful institution like the military can you know, wrap their resources around the man and ignore the woman. And it also speaks to other observations we've made this morning that it's just not that easy to walk away. People do blame the woman, they disbelieve the woman, and this is the reason that the Violence Against Women Act and having those advocates is so important, so that there will be resources wrapped around the woman to try to help her tell her story, to try to make sure that she doesn't become homeless because she's made a decision to leave her abuser. And I mean, this is really a classic example of someone who took a stand, but is paying a high price for it.
Christine is our last here. Oklahoma City, Democratic caller. Go ahead, Christine.
Hi. I think domestic violence is just egregious. I don't see, how a woman can defend.
You know what, Christine, you're breaking up a little bit. Could you repeat that? You don't understand how a woman could.
Well, I don't understand how women can associate love and violence together. But that really is not my point. we have a situation in Oklahoma where the police officer is in jail as we speak because he sexually abused, within a mile radius of me, he sexually abused 8 women, African-American women. I have not heard this on the media. I have not heard this story. It's all over Oklahoma news. Then you have the police officer there in California that beat this homeless woman to a pulp. The reason why we cannot get our arms wrapped around this issue is because we keep fragmenting it. We talk about it as if domestic violence is different than other types of violence against women.
Okay, we'll leave that point there, Congresswoman.
You know, I hear what she's saying. She's speaking to a larger issue of a rites of passage for men to be violent. It's really important, I think, for men to denounce violence as well. My son was telling me a story of a man who came in, to play football, watch a football game with a bunch of guys, and came in and said, "Oh, sorry I'm late, but I had to deal with my old lady. I had to put her in check. I had to beat her up." And the host of the party looked at him and said, "Really? Get out of my house. Leave right now." And so I think that, if you have a police department, a blue coat, or the military, or your buddies that you watch football with or play football with, if you have a culture of men who think that it's your rite of passage to bed, any number of women and love them and leave them, or to rape them, or to beat them, if they think that that makes you manly or macho, this is a kind of culture that I would implore men to denounce and reverse. And I thank her for making that point.
Congresswoman, I just want to ask you before you leave, the president will speak tonight about this threat of ISIS. Are you willing to support an expanded airstrike into Syria to combat this threat of ISIS?
Well, I can tell you that would take quite a bit of discussion and debate, because that would, in fact, be a declaration of war. I don't know that that's what the president is going to ask for.
Well, reports are that the president doesn't think he needs to ask for it.
Well, he right now he has the authorization to do airstrikes in Iraq from the previous authorization. So if he doesn't need to act, then I can't speculate that he's going to talk about Syria, because he does not have authorization to do that, and he would have to come to Congress for that.
All right, Congresswoman, more to come on that. Thank you very much for your time this morning and the discussion.
It was a great discussion. It's the 20th anniversary of VAWA, and hopefully we'll put ourselves out of business someday.